Welcome. On behalf of the Sobrato Family Foundation, I'm pleased to welcome you to our third and final session of this spring series on business models, sustainable business models for scaling and impact. And we're pleased to come back to you with this content and go a little bit deeper and a little bit further. It's the first, one of the first topics from our 2014 session that, backed by popular demand, we thought there was a lot more to say about this topic, and we're happy that you're all joining us for it. So in this series, we started with some of the topics that we think are really key toward really building an organization that is poised for scale, sustainability, and really making a great impact on the communities that I know you all wish to serve, and possibly leading to systemic change. So we started with theories of change and logic models and touched on business planning and business models last year. We've also done some sessions on collective impact and metrics and performance management, as well as culture and leadership, as we really think those are key toward pulling all of those components together. And before we get started, we always like to see who's in the room, and it really helps frame for the presenters what type of, where to focus the presentation. So I want you to indulge me. If you've been to our sessions before, you know how this works. It's all on your mobile phone and polling software. So there's some instructions on the screen. Essentially, the easiest way to go is via texting. And the number is 22333. And the first thing you need to do is text Sobrato. Doesn't matter if it's all caps or lowercase. And you'll see that message come back to you that you've joined my session and that you are ready to participate in the polling. So I'm going to wait, make sure everybody's gotten there. Has everybody started the first? It's the only time in the presentation where it's a good sign when everybody's looking down at their phone. Okay. So the first question, we just have two getting to know you questions. The first one is, what role do you play in your organization? It's a good thing to know whether you're executive, part of the leadership team, other staff member, or a board member. And we'll see it all populates live. Great. Yeah, hopefully it's going a little bit slow. Oh, there we go. Great. So we like to see a good representation of board members. Typically, great. Okay, it's settling out. A couple more seconds. Great. So mostly staff. And let's click through to the next one. And then we just want to know about your organization and the budget size. So under $1 million, 1 to 2 million, 2.1 to 5, 5.1 to 10, and over 10 million. Again, a conversation about business models really is veered toward the type of organization and what stage development you are, so this is really helpful. Wow, interesting. We have a larger percentage of under $1 million organizations than at some of our other sessions, so this is really helpful. Thank you to everybody for participating. And then the last one is really about if you have any, it's still going to the last poll. So if you have any initial questions of things that you want our panel to answer, to address, if you want to text in some short questions so that we know, what sort of things are on your mind with business models, and as we walk through the presentation, we'll flash back on this slide again later, but this is a good way to gear the conversation. Okay, so I also wanted to remind you that we launched a resource guide on our website with the content from this session. So there's some information on your handout in case you want to go through. There are some specific resources toward this topic, but others as well. And finally, we are thrilled to partner with Palo Alto Community Fund on this session. It's one of our goals to really partner with other providers and foundations in the area, because we're all working on very similar things. So I want to invite Cami Vale up here to give a brief introduction. I just want to say thank you and welcome to the Palo Alto Community Fund's grantees and applicants who are here with us today as well. So Cami.
We are so excited to be here today. So thank you to the Sobrato Family Foundation for allowing us to partner with them to bring you this program. The Palo Alto Community Fund's mission is to grow, sustain, and use its endowment and other donated funds to support the work of new and existing nonprofit organizations serving the Palo Alto area. We provide program support grants to organizations serving the communities of Palo Alto, East Palo Alto, and Menlo Park. And we have 8 different focus areas. I'm going to read them very quickly to you. Art and culture, community development, social services, education, environment, health, housing and nutrition, seniors, and youth and families. So if you haven't heard about us and you serve the local Palo Alto community, we have grant applications up on our website in December, and we do a yearly grant cycle, so those will be due next February. In addition to our yearly grant awards, each year we hold a community-wide training where we invite all nonprofit organizations who have applied to us for a grant so that we can help further their nonprofit education. And we welcome many of you here today from that segment. But I'd like to thank all of you on behalf of the Palo Alto Community Fund for really improving our communities through the great work that you do in our communities. So thank you so much for all you do. I'd now like to welcome today's speaker, Craig and Janet, with Alexa moderating the discussion and Q&A. Complete bios for all 3 are on the handouts that are on your chair, and as well as links to resource lists on there as well. So this is how the session will go. First, Craig Regal, CFO of the Nonprofit Finance Fund, will start us out by providing an overview of business models based on a framework he helped develop. Then Janet Gless, president of the New Teacher Center, will walk us through a case study of how the New Teacher Center thinks about their business model and how it has informed a recent campaign to raise $60 million after launching itself as an independent nonprofit just 6 years ago. Finally, Alexis will then join both speakers on stage and moderate a discussion and Q&A with all of you. So I'd now like to welcome Craig to the stage. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Can you hear me? So I'm Craig Regal. I'm with the Nonprofit Finance Fund. I'm going to get the clicker. I'm delighted to be here, and I want to thank the Sobrato Family Foundation and the Palo Alto Community Fund for hosting this event. I understand this is a group of extraordinary practitioners, and I am delighted to have a chance to spend a little bit of time with you this morning. I am going to talk about business models, but I'm going to talk about business models by talking about things that you need to think about your business model, and hope that's helpful. Before I dive into that, just a couple of words, a brief introduction. We are the Nonprofit Finance Fund, and we are a mission-driven 501c3 nonprofit. Our mission is to unlock the potential of other mission-driven organizations by doing 3 things. The first is we provide tailored investments. We are a CDFI. We run a tax credit business. We run some grant programs. We move dollars to people who are doing great work. The second is that we provide strategic advice. We help people think about how do you operate in our social sector more effectively and manage financial issues. And I've spent most of my time with NFF working and leading a practice within that umbrella, and I will talk about what I've learned from that. I'll also say that I'm currently the CFO, which is a sign that if you tell people how to do things often enough, occasionally people invite you to do it, which is a career risk, but it is a pleasure to try to serve my organization with the same tools that I served my clients with previously. The last thing that we do is that we think we do an awful lot of work with a very large number of organizations around the field, and we hope to learn things that way. We try to capture those insights and share them. We do some things that are broad-based. We survey the sector, and we're going to talk about what that looks like. We do thought pieces. We capture learning from our clients and cohorts of clients and the funders with whom we work. Our aspiration is that if we put dollars to work and help people think about things and provide data and information, maybe we'll serve the communities in the way that we aspire to. So, oops. The reason we talk about business models isn't because business models are on their own particularly interesting. It's because we face a very daunting task. We as leaders and board members and funders of nonprofits, which I take it from the surveys, everybody in the room, are trying to change the lives of people in our communities, and we want to do that with three things. We want to sustainably provide impact, and we want to do it at scale. And doing all three of those at the same time is quite hard. And each one makes the others harder. If you are willing to give up on the quality of your program, being sustainable and scaling is a whole lot easier because you just manage the dollars. If you are willing to be small, it's a little easier to be sustainable and make your business run reliably and deliver on high quality with a sustainable outcome. And similarly, if you're willing to go and burn the ship as you are using it, it's a lot easier to grow quickly and flame out over time because you're unsustainable. Collectively, this is a double black diamond management challenge, and it's what most of us have signed up for. So congratulations, let's dive off the cliff. What do we mean by sustainable scale? We mean, in simple math terms, and sometimes it's easiest to reduce these concepts from big complicated words to really simple terms, it means that repeatable and reliable revenue over your total operating costs are greater than 1. That's a baseline for sustainability. And in the world in which we all operate, things happen. So the other requirement is that you have an ability to periodically fund additional investments. And those are to adapt, those are to grow, those are to change, those are frankly to weather storms and bad things that happen. When an organization has this true, we think of that as being a sustainable nonprofit entity. I want to walk through each piece of that one at a time because there's a little bit more to how you think about it. So the first piece is repeatable and reliable revenue. We're going to talk about and unpack the concept of business models. But by repeatable and reliable revenue, what I mean is money that you get from people relatively voluntarily to do the things that you do. So it's the fees, it's the contributions, it's the investment proceeds from your endowment if you're lucky enough to have one. It's dollars that flow predictably. It doesn't mean each check needs to come the same every way, but you need to get the repeatable, reliable revenue sources. And those are the ones that we count as being part of your business model revenue. Your grandmother passing and leaving a large bequest to you does not count as a repeatable and reliable event. On the other hand, contributed funds from all of your parishioners might, if that happens to be what you are. The second piece is ongoing operating costs. And this is really important. We talk a lot and have written a lot about the importance of capturing the full cost of doing business. Ongoing operating costs are the direct cost to serve, plus all of the overhead costs that are required to have an organization that serves so those direct costs can work, plus the depreciation of all of your capitalized costs. That counts. It shows up on your P&L every time you get your audit done. And if you can't pay for that over time, that's a problem. Plus your financing costs. What does it cost to manage the cash flow to get there? If you think about those collectively, those are your operating costs. And if you carve out any piece of it and you manage for this equation, you're going to have a problem. The simple standard, an awful lot of people talk about what should one's margin be. Sustainability really is about being greater than 1. The important thing is that reliably over time it's greater than 1. Depending on your business, the healthy place may be that running a very fine margin is fine. There are some very lumpy businesses where if you're not running 8 or 10% margins on that, that's a problem. There are an awful lot that are falling in a sort of a sweet spot in between. Most of the healthy nonprofits that we see over long periods of time tend to run in the 3 to 5% operating margin realm. And that seems to be achievable and doesn't manage to blow up. We'd like it to be north of that. But the really critical part is it's greater than 1. And then the last piece is you aren't sustainable if you can't deal with the opportunity or the threat that shows up next Tuesday. So a part of being sustainable is that over time you have the resources to pay for the surprises or the opportunities, or when your peer organization goes out of business and you want to pick up their programs because there are a whole lot of people that otherwise wouldn't be served. Having some resources available or that you can draw on to do that is a core part of sustainability. So we think if you do all of these things, there's a pretty good chance that you'll be in business long enough to serve your mission over long periods of time. And that is, of course, the whole reason we care. We tried to figure out how the nonprofits with whom we interact see their progress on these dimensions. And so we ran a survey. We've been running a survey now for about half a decade, and we do it every year. This year we had 5,400 some odd nonprofits all across the US answer our survey. And of those, 1,100 were here in California. And we took a look and said, what did we find out about what it means to run a nonprofit? I think some of us are frustrated that when you read a lot of the press, there's a focus on the large, flashy folks or the big national organizations. We have a representative sample, and we count every survey respondent the same. The lion's share, about 60%, are between $500,000 and $5 million in size. So most of them represent what most of the nonprofits in our space look like. And they are representative across sectors. So we have a whole lot of human services, education, arts. We have a wide array, but really concentrated in those three particular areas. The things that we found on a national basis probably aren't going to be surprising. People are struggling, demand is growing, delivering surpluses is hard. What was a little surprising to me is that California nonprofits look an awful lot like everybody across the country. When I try to get a restaurant reservation in San Francisco, I feel like things are different here and the world is prosperous. It turns out that's not the experience of most of the folks who are in our sector with whom we're working. California bias is high on demand is rising. So we tend to be about 32% of the national population of nonprofits see demand rising appreciably in each of the last 2 years. In California, it is a higher number than that. It's about 37% last year and an expected higher number this year. Rising at all is also a larger population. So our organizations here locally are seeing more demand. Are they able to meet it? Unfortunately, California nonprofits also bias high for feeling unable to meet demand. So we are 5 points higher on the scale of we are not able to fully meet the demand that we face. So this is a bad combination. It suggests that not all of our prosperity is well shared and that we're participating in it. It is also true that fewer California nonprofits ran surpluses last year or expect to run them this year, and that those who ran deficits did so more egregiously than the peer group across the country. Not radically different, more the same than different, but some notion that we're in this bubble where the world works more readily, simply not true. Around the topic of business models, we asked a couple of questions. The first is, what is it that is the top challenge that you're facing? Far and away, and this is the national survey, far and away, the top challenge people were facing was how to achieve long-term financial sustainability. We have a long laundry list here. Raising funding that covers full cost, that sounds like a related topic, that was quite high. Managing to offer competitive pay to staff and retain staff, very high, and that tends to be a consequence of a lack of resources. This isn't surprising to you. The surprising part is that when we asked people, what can you talk to your funder about? Those same topics scored poorly. So anybody can talk to a funder about expanding a program. I can add a new site. But it turns out that the folks who have to talk about the real challenges you face and the financial challenges and their drivers struggle quite a lot. So what do we learn from this? Our world is hard, our business prospects are somewhat challenging, and the people who exist allegedly to help us solve that are the ones we're least able to talk to it about. So what I want to talk about today is how do you frame constructively those conversations and break through some of those walls, because the short answer is we can't solve any of these on our own. If we can communicate and enlist our funders, we can go and change what happens. So how do we think about business model? You run enterprises. You aren't just people with programs. The enterprise is the cradle of the nonprofit and the cradle of the program. It doesn't exist on its own. Enterprises happen because somebody invests in building it. We're going to talk about builders and buyers, which is a core concept here. We are here in Redwood Shores. We look around, and this phenomenon is well known in the commercial space. The economics work the same in the nonprofit space. Somebody needs to invest either their time or energy or dollars in getting a program and an organization going, or in scaling, expanding, changing what the enterprise does. Building is making an investment in any of a number of forms in building the capacity of an enterprise to deliver its mission, and we're going to talk about what that means a little bit. There's another piece of the business model, which is where does the revenue come from that pays you to do what you do over time? Very helpfully, thinking of those as buyers. And it doesn't matter if they're donors or if they're fee payers, if they're third-party fee payers, or if they are recipients of your service that pay on their own. Whatever combination doesn't matter. But it's the people who pay for you to deliver the service are buyers. They are fundamentally different in ways that'll become apparent from builders. Here in Silicon Valley, everybody knows the difference between talking to a VC and talking to a customer. It's helpful if we think similarly in our space and if we speak to people in the language that they want to hear. What tends to be different is that the recipients of the program execution are generally separate third parties. Not always, but more often than not, the folks who are receiving the program execution, the folks who you're doing the work with, are somebody other than the people who are paying either of the pieces. Collectively, we think about this as the way that the economics in a business model lives, and a very healthy dynamic. The unhealthy part is that we often don't disentangle it and think about these as separate pieces or talk about them. So I'm an economist by education. I need to have a chart that goes up and to the right. This is the life cycle of any enterprise, for-profit or not. And what you have is a time scale across the bottom. And the vertical scale are essentially dollars. And what happens is that expenses, the yellow line, show up. Somebody has a good idea. They start spending time and money on it. Eventually, they figure out that somebody might pay for that, which is when the blue line, the business model revenue or repeatable, reliable revenue, starts to tick up. As soon as that happens, we all get optimistic because that's what we are prone to do. And we start spending more money and bringing in more money, and generally we spend the money faster. At some point, if the line's crossed, you've reached a point of sustainability. And after that, if they stay crossed, you have a viable enterprise over time. If they don't, you don't. That phenomenon we're very familiar with. The part I want to focus on is the gap between the yellow and the blue lines, here and up here. And that's the piece where you're spending more money than you're bringing in from your business model. That is the primary use of build dollars. We often think about it as things that are explicitly capacity building, but in a lot of cases, this is we're hiring somebody to deliver our service, or hiring a CFO before we have the scale to hire a professional there. This is spending money on your business, either in discrete one-off ways, or just subsidizing the fact that you're too small to break even for a period of time in the hopes that they'll cross again. That's the power of the build dollars. And in the absence of that, it is very, very, very hard to grow your program without while you're in the place where your expenses are leading your revenue. We talk about business models. What is a business model? Most people tend to talk about business models as being the activity here at the lower left. What's the revenue and how do you get paid? I don't think that's helpful. Talking about revenue streams in the absence of a cost structure is really pointless as managing an announcement. The business model is the relationship between how you get paid, in what way, for what, how does it work with volume, to what's the cost structure that requires execution. So what is it that you pay to do? The relationship between those and the way that they interact is what I would describe as the business model. A business model will generally imply a capital structure. So on the basis of the way that that works, it's really important to figure out how do you go and give rise to it with some build investments. But the whole bottom 2/3 of this is the business model, and it fits together. And the important parts about business models are not how many zeros are in the numbers. It's what's the relationship between the revenue structure and the cost structure. So just to drive this home, builders and buyers. Serving the same mission, a buyer says, I want to pay for tutoring services, and here's my $5,000, how many sessions do I get? And if it works, I might do it again next year. A builder says, I'm providing you capital to build a tutoring service. here's my $5 million, and my question for you is when can you bring in other dollars to go make this sustainable? And if that works, I say, great, I don't ever need to do that again. That was a win. The difference is really obvious here. When we talk to donors, though, it's often confusing who is whom. What's important to realize is that talking to one in the language that the other one is prepared to hear doesn't work. If you want to talk to your buyer who wants to pay for tutoring sessions, and you pitch him on, if we do this, in 18 months we're going to be sustainable and scale's going to be up, instead of pitching him on, this is the impact you can make with your tutoring sessions, your conversation's over and you don't get a check. Similarly, if you talk to the builder and say, with your $5 million, wow, that's 120,000 tutoring sessions, isn't that a great thing? Two bad things might happen. One is you might not get a check. The second is you'll get a check and they'll hold you accountable to that and won't care whether you're sustainable. You'll have the wrong conversation. Either of those are a bad outcome. What's important is matching your conversation to the role that you're playing, and they're radically different. Okay, I am about out of time. I would be not helpful if I didn't say a couple of things that you can do that are practical and useful. The first is ask for what you need. There is no chance your builders will invest in your enterprise if you don't tell them with a straight face, without apology, what it will cost you to build what you need. And there's no chance your buyers will pay full cost if you keep telling them it costs less than it really does to run your business. Ask for what you need. Number two, tell one story. We tend to want to attune everything to our audience. At some level, you need to do that. If you can't tell a single story about your business, it's really hard to scale that up. Telling 2 stories is easy. Telling 20 is impossible. Tell one story. Keep score on both sides. If you can't keep track of your progress on the build side and the buy side, and keep them separate, you and your boards and your funders will collectively make very poor decisions. The data that comes out of this and the sense of where you stand is absolutely essential to success. Fourth one, plan a little bit. You can't do anything without planning, and then experiment a lot. The value of the data you get from trying things is so much more valuable than the contemplation you have with the smartest people you've ever met. It's worth contemplating, and then try it and get rapid feedback and see what worked and change. Plan, execute, learn, repeat. That doesn't stop. If you're focused on any of those without getting all of them, chances are you're going to fall off the treadmill. So with that said, I'd like to invite Janet to come up, who is an exemplar of how you make this work in the real world and get dollars to unlock your potential.
Thanks very much.
Janet.
Thank you. Good morning. It's interesting when I was listening to Craig, and I found my head just nodding, and then I kept thinking, oh, gee, and yet we have to. There's so much more. New Teacher Center is a not-for-profit, a 501c3 that was originally incubated at the University of California, Santa Cruz back in 1998. And we became a not-for-profit, a standalone 501c3 in 2009. And what I want to share is kind of our story and how we've tried and stumbled our way forward, I think, to find a place of at least fiscal, we're on the path towards fiscal and organizational sustainability. Are we there yet? No. Are we learning as we go? Absolutely. But I do want to tell our story a bit and give you some reactions. And once again, as I said, as I was listening to Craig, I kept thinking, oh, yeah, that's another thing we should be thinking about. At any rate, we are an organization that, as its name implies, works on behalf of teachers, particularly beginning teachers in our school systems, as well as school leaders, to accelerate their development on behalf of kids. We're a social mission-driven organization, because beginning teachers, for the most part, end up in low-performing schools, in high poverty, very diverse communities. Primarily, about 40% end up in urban settings, 41% in urban, and there is a churn that happens. Now, as the churn, some debate the nature of the churn, the depth of the churn, and the rate of the churn, but there are students in those settings who are never taught, ever, by a teacher with more than 2 or 3 years experience. We see it incumbent upon the system to really accelerate their development. And we do it with a kind of what we see as a fairly innovative model that derives from a program that was put on the ground in the Santa Cruz catchment area, the county, led by Ellen Moyer, our founding and current CEO. And it was a high-intensity mentoring model, but was really embedded in schools with an instruction-focused, student success, student learning-driven model of just-in-time classroom-based learning for these new practitioners. We really, our theory of action, though, is really touching extraordinary teachers in the system who become these mentors. And our role as an organization is to build their capacity as teacher leaders to accelerate the novice in their community. We do this with a model of training, support, resources, consultation, kind of wraparound services that actually ultimately touch the system, because we also work with the principals and school leaders in the system, with program leaders, and we provide resources to the beginning teachers. The idea is we can impact three things, and this is one of the first things we did when we exited the university. As I said, we started out in 1998. We were less than about 5-6 FTE at the time. We are, by the way, currently now about 230 staff members across the United States and located in about 24 states with offices in 10 locations. We work internationally, but when we left the university, 11 years into our existence, one of the first things we needed to do, this is one of those things like, oh yeah, we could have done this a few years ago, couldn't we, was to capture and have the one story. What is it that we do? What is our theory of action or our model of change and impact? And we did this in part at the nudging of our venture philanthropists who are helping us exit university. We were lucky that we had a shepherd along the way who connected us with venture philanthropy to help us exit university. And they demanded that we be able to articulate impact and describe with a single theory of action how we were going to accomplish that. They were holding our feet to the fire, as it were. And this describes, with the circle in the middle, our focus of our intervention. So it's kind of a logic model. Our intervention is the circle. The outcomes are to the right, the inputs are to the left. The inputs derive partnership with an educational entity. Our services include mentor, our teacher leader touch points, principal touch points, program leader touch points, and beginning teacher touch points. Around the circle is also some data collection that we provide. Our primary impacts to the right are then teacher retention, teacher improvement, and teacher leadership, with the secondary inputs being then, of course, student learning. We did, during those first 11 years at university, however, capture proof points. We were lucky enough to have opportunities, including a federal study we were part of, to give us data that demonstrated elements of this model, of this logic model, and that we could, when these things were put together, deliver proof points of impact on student learning and on the other primary outcomes as I described. That story we were able to tell about what we do, why we do it, and what were the outcomes that we could guarantee given those conditions, helped move us in this path of development as an organization. And this just kind of captures our journey. First 11 years at university, as I said, it was our incubation period. It was an opportunity for us to kind of codify our work, as I said, gather proof points, decide how big was our ambition. It was during that time that our story went from being, X number of beginning teachers to thousands to, by the time we exited the university, we were aspiring to all. N equals all beginning teachers. We also grew during that first phase from those original 5-6 FTE to about 135. And we were in the social sciences division of a university that really was not interested in having one of its entities out delivering services in New York City or in Guam or in Scotland. That was not part of the university's mission. And we had a mutual understanding that it was time for us to go on our own, and it was actually an amazingly exciting and fortuitous point in our career, not only because it helped us codify what we wanted to do and our impact, but it helped us understand what it meant to run an organization. Up until that time, we had the benefit of the back office. You know, we had the university HR, we had university IT, we used their servers, their recruitment mechanisms, all those things, benefits packages. We had to, in those first, and this was our kind of our 2.0 phase when we exited, we had to rebuild that, or build that for about 135 people, from 0 to 60. That was what build dollars were used for. We were able to garner enough build dollars to help us become standalone, build that infrastructure from scratch. And within the period of about a year or two, we were able to start saying, well, we have many of these things in place. What's 3.0 going to look like? And that's where we are now, in a period of envisioning, or have been in a period of envisioning 3.0. Ellen, our CEO, last week said, I want to announce that as of July 1st, we are 3.0. So our organization has spent the last couple of years saying, so what is it going to look like? In order to get there, we did some internal work and some external work. We did these things. The left-hand side are 3 things that we partnered with external entities to do. Some of them were maybe not, if I were to look back on this and say, we could have done it a little better, could have been a little bit more comprehensive, but we kind of stumbled our way forward through this. We partnered, 2 of them were pro bono. We were really lucky to get connected with pro bono. Market analysis, really understanding, where are beginning teachers in the country, what are the contexts. We did a second, we commissioned or contracted with a consulting organization to do the sort of cost of services that Craig's describing. The Excel spreadsheets that we have will blow your mind. I mean, they're pages and tab after tab after tab to the level of quarter hours of time invested in the delivery of our services. How much does it cost for us to deliver 1 day of professional development? What does a consulting day cost? What's the administrative grant management behind that? We have it down to the quarter hour for every single one of the pieces of things we deliver in order for us to understand, so what sort of margins are we kicking off? Which of our lines of service, because we do fee for service to educational entities, as I said, which of these are most productive for us? Which are those that have a high margin, low margin? What's the overhead costs that go along with that? We also then, most recently, and this is just a year ago, benefited from a partnership with the Harvard Business School alumni group to look at our sales structure. How are we then, if we're going to aspire to the next phase, 3.0 is a growth phase, what does that look like for us organizationally? Do we have the right structure? Have we put the investment? And do we need to look at some more build dollars to help build out that infrastructure? Internally, we are simultaneously building our IT platform. We were also starting ongoing analysis of our contract and clients to understand exactly, so what is the trajectory for our clients, longevity, what's the average size of our contracts, what can we expect as reliable sources of revenue ongoingly from whom, what's our retention rate of clients, which are the ones that we need to invest more in order to maintain. And most recently, we did an internal review this year to say, so if we look at all of our lines of work and our mission, what are our priorities for our next evolution? We basically understand also our work, and this kind of describes our dual revenue stream, building upon Craig's construct of the build and buy. We're lucky that we have a set of services for which we can derive revenue, and as Craig said, it doesn't matter who pays for those services. On the right-hand side, we cover with the cost of the fees charged for those services, we cover all those costs as are delineated. And those dollars come from federal, from school districts and other educational entities, and from philanthropy as third-party payers. In fact, about half of our philanthropy dollars are buyers. They're not builders. They want us to put a program down here. They want to buy our services on behalf of. They're a third-party payer that oftentimes is used to incentivize a school district or an educational entity to link up with us or to launch an initiative. But those are all the things that are covered by those dollars. Our build revenue, as Craig said, looks very different. There's almost no overlap between the two sources. I shouldn't say it's exclusively, but there's nominal overlap. I was just talking to our VP of development yesterday just to check in about our dollars. And he says, well, this holds true. The 50/50s holds true with the exception of, and then he pointed out one funder that has just given us a fairly sizable grant for development to build out a new and innovate a new product, but is also simultaneously funding the pilot on the ground and the delivery of those services as well. So we do have some of those overlaps. But these are the left-hand things that we feel will drive our mission that we also need. Elevate the influence that we want to have on policy, on the national dialogue, be able to help us capture impact, which very frequently is a hard sell for the buyer to fund impact or research. So we oftentimes have to go after build revenue for that. We also, in going, as I said, these last 3 or 4 years, this phase, prepping us for 3.0, we need to be able to understand, so where is our revenue coming from? Not only what type of revenue we have, but where is it coming from and what percentage? And then to imagine a future, a story that we could tell in order to mount this campaign for growth capital in order to help us get there. The left-hand side is 2012. Well, actually, it was fiscal year 13, so that's 2012, 2013, and where our dollars were. We had about, of that grant, 38% grants and gifts. Even at that point in time, about 50% of that was going towards buy, not just build. We projected, as part of our model, that if we could grow our online services with increased margins, we would be able to project a future where we could be sustainable by 2018. This is a 6-year forecast, and we just completed our growth capital campaign last November, so we are only about 6 months into the implementation of this, but we're already at we're just completing fiscal year 15, and the picture's changing. We already have found out, and I'll share the story, we are not able to market our online quite as we expected. We had not invested in the marketing side enough to drive that increase. We're having to re-examine. We're going to focus on that next year, but can we project at this rate that growth from online being 8% to 32%, is that still realistic? We were very transparent with our build funders last fall, saying, we're not sure. And we were able to talk to them about where we were, what were our numbers from the year before to the current. And they're behind us. They're backing us as long as we're being transparent with them and saying, so here's what we've uncovered. Here are the data. Here's what we're understanding, and here's what we're doing about it. We haven't lost a single one of those build funders, but being able to tell the story and being able to be transparent about what we're learning as we go. I realize I want to just check the time here a little bit. As I said, and as I think it was Cami early on, said we were in the middle of a growth capital campaign. I've mentioned that. We completed that last November. We were able to, as a result of having the various data and the pieces in place, we were able to tell a story to build funders. And this is how we described using the growth capital dollars, the build dollars, to help take us to that next level of sustainability. Primarily, or the largest chunk was, or maybe not the largest, but yeah, actually definitely the largest chunk, was to go towards increasing the impact. We wanted to go from 26,000 beginning teachers being touched. Actually, when we started the campaign, it was just 23,000 beginning teachers being touched by our work to 60,000. We projected it being half face-to-face, half online, basically, and then increase our sales capacity. This was the story we were able to tell about what we wanted to do, and also how we wanted to use the revenue, the build revenue internally. Investment in capacity, being able to build our capacity to deliver increased numbers, of course, if we are going to go to 60,000 in 5 years, that we need that innovation and online in order to have higher margin deliverables, and then the infrastructure behind all of this. Through this, in retrospect, and I guess it isn't a retrospect so much as this moment in time, when we were, Alexa and I were talking last fall about kind of our learnings, what we really are able to articulate, maybe not so much learnings as recognitions of some tensions that exist as we go through this process. The first thing is, we're not there yet. We're still in the becoming. We're launching 3.3. We'll continue to be transparent of what we're learning because we know we can. It's a matter of when and how and to what extent. However, are able to be very articulate about some of the tensions we're experiencing. One is, it's really hard to stay true to a mission while wanting to scale, at the same time being an organization that has its history derived from innovation. Because innovation creates a churn. And it's wonderful, it's thrilling, it feeds a staff that you've brought in, probably because they were innovators. But in order to scale, you have to have a certain amount of cookie cutter. Some things have to be standardized, replicable from place to place. So if we're going to 60,000 beginning teachers, what a beginning teacher or the teacher leader working with that beginning teacher in Florida gets has to be of equal quality of what one in Iowa gets, in Chicago, in Alaska, in Hawaii. How do you ensure that? It requires some cookie cutter. It requires standardization. But culturally, there's a tension ongoingly, and there's also a tension within our funding community. Because quite frankly, many buy funders want innovative, disruptive interventions. You've heard the term. And disruption is not necessarily scalable, especially when there's the repercussions for the organization itself. The other one is, and Craig and I were talking about this before, it's the human equation. Yeah, we want to drive towards fiscal sustainability and stability. And you know what? We wouldn't be where we are without the amazing talent we have on our staff. They're wonderful people. They've taken us to where we are. They are committed heart and soul. How do we nurture and maintain that human-oriented humaneness to our culture while we are also talking bottom line? And boy, we've got to cut the margins. And how much of that capacity and bringing people together can we afford? And yes, we know you'd like to meet face to face, but our staff is dispersed over 20 states. But how do we create that? It's ongoing, the social and emotional. We've made it an absolute theme of our work. So it's also, I think, I don't have to speak to this one, but this too much more, but this notion of discipline and opportunism. Funder, we have an opportunity this year that we're hoping we've been able to turn into, with discipline, something that's going to feed us. But it's a one-time opportunity taking place this summer that what Funder offered us, this one-time opportunity. We said yes. We'll tell you next fall whether it was a good yes. But it was one of those things where we had to sit down and say, is this worth the risk? Are we willing to take those dollars to do an X? And you know what? It's a tad off mission, but it's linked and maybe will drive business our way, drive revenue. We'll take that risk. And because the window was literally a 6-month window, we could say, put hands on deck, we can manage this, we'll outsource. But it was a very hard decision to make, discipline, opportunism. I think the last one I just want to touch on for a moment. It's about that tension between knowing this, and this is what we stand for, and this is what we need to be able to this is a stake in the ground we need to put. And then also this desire to build the plane while you're flying it, because there are opportunities abounding. How often do we need to put the stake in the ground and say, this is what we're tethered to? This is what we know. Here's our impact. And are there other times where I say, you know what? Let's try this out. Maybe we can build it, and do some rapid prototyping, and we'll learn from that too. But then you've got to come back and keep putting stakes in the ground. It's a constant tension between, and it kind of links back up to that innovation piece, but when do we have to say, this is what we know, and this is what we're going to tether ourselves to? Last time, I'm not going to speak to this other than to say that it goes back to, I think, Cammie's comment earlier this morning, that culture and leadership was one of the topics of one of the earlier sessions. That, for us, is the foundation of what we do. And that has, luckily for us, been stable. Senior leadership, I've been at the organization as one of the founders, so Ellen Moyer, our CEO, is founding CEO. We have had stability at the leadership level that enabled us, and we've also paid attention to culture. But we realized that in order to do that, those uprights are kind of the cultural elements we need to support in service of the impact, which is kind of the roof of this structure. The practices that we're trying to put in place are really critical, and those are the things that go across all of those uprights on behalf of kind of an organizational coherence, sustainability of culture, as well as impact. So thank you very much. It's, as I said, we are in the becoming. Hopefully we can start looking forward to a 4.0, but thank you for having the opportunity to share our story.
So I'm going to invite Craig and Janet to come join me on the stage, and we're going to take a pause for a minute, and we're going to do some polling. We actually can't move that podium, so we're just going to kind of rearrange ourselves so we can make sure we see the whole room. Is my mic on now? Am I good? Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, great. So we're going to do three things. We're going to take a minute, do some polling, and get some of your reactions to what you just heard. Here now, have you reflect a bit on where your organization is and share that with the room. Then we're going to have a little follow-up conversation here, and then we're going to turn to you for your questions for our speakers. So the first polling question is, where does your organization's revenue come from? Are you heavy on government funding? Are you heavy on fee-for-service, private philanthropy, maybe a mix of two of these, maybe a mix of all three? And I'm also remembering that the majority of you here today are under $1 million in budget. Am I remembering that right? So that's interesting. I think depending on the mix of who's in the audience, these numbers will be different. But right now, a lot of you are relying heavily on private philanthropy, and some of you have a mix. Generally, we're lower on people who are all government, or mostly fee-for-service. Okay, let's go. We ready for the next question? We've got 4 of these, so this is the first one. Second one, our organization clearly makes the case for build revenue to invest in our capacity and infrastructure. Do you strongly agree with that statement? Agree with it? Disagree, or strongly disagree? Strongly disagree is D. I hope I'm not blocking you all. Agree is C.
Wow.
A. Agree is B, strongly agree is A. Okay, so most of you disagree that you're not actually making a clear case for the build revenue for probably a wide variety of reasons. Okay, you're more honest than the group last year. I think the group last year seemed to be a little bit more, I don't know, confident about this. Okay, next one. Our organization has a realistic understanding of the mix of revenue we need over time to deepen our impact. Do you strongly agree that you have that realistic understanding in your organization? That would be an A. Do you agree? B. Disagree? C. Strongly disagree? D.
this is an interesting one. So we're kind of evenly divided. It's a tricky question because it's probably like, yeah, we have a realistic understanding, but we're still maybe having a hard time, or there's probably a lot of nuances to answering that question. And then we have one final question, which is, how does your organization think about its cash reserves? Do you think about it, A, as a rainy day fund? Do you think about it for investing in strategic priorities, that you could actually use it maybe to build a key piece of infrastructure? For both? And the D is, we don't have a meaningful cash reserve. And again, we've got a lot of little organizations in the room, so I wouldn't be surprised if we had a lot of Ds. But it's interesting. Most people are saving for a rainy day. Some people are able to invest in strategic priorities, and about half responding, a little less than half, don't have cash reserve at all. And if you remember, Craig, I think you said in California we're trending less on cash reserves compared to the rest of the country. Is that right? Did you present that data?
That data is true. I think I presented that we're trending worse on margins and deficits.
And it also is that we're trending less, I think, at least when I looked at your data last
It's
year.
slightly less than in cash reserves. And I think the headline, the California difference isn't as important as the national trend, which is that half of the nonprofits in the country don't have a meaningful cash reserve. And so if this data is true, you're well above average. But it's shocking, and I think because it's hard to do. The truth is that most of our peers do not have substantial reserves.